Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us on this May Thought Co-op. This may be the last time we host these on Zoom, is that most of our members are really interested in meeting in person, and we're looking forward to getting back to that as well. We will be recording this meeting for those that can't attend this morning, and we encourage you, if you have any colleagues, businesses close by that are also interested in the topic, to share this video with them. It will be on our YouTube channel. This topic has been of great interest to many in our central business district, and so why don't we go ahead and get started. Let me first introduce Jake Warren. He's the capital projects engineer for the city of Englewood. Jake, I'll let you take it from here.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you all for having us. As David said, my name is Jake Warren. I'm an engineer with the Public Works Department, as well as the project manager for the 285 and Broadway project. And with me here this morning to talk about the project is Dan Little. So Dan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning. Dan Little here with Atkins, the consultant project manager, working with the city on this project.
All right, Dan, you want to pull up? We got a little PowerPoint presentation for you guys.
All right. So can everybody see the screen now?
Yeah, looks good. So why don't we already kind of did introduction, so why don't we jump right in, and I'll kind of start us off by giving us a brief background on this project and sort of where it started and where it stands right now. So the city recognized for some time that there were major needs for improvements to this interchange. There's some big deficiencies with safety, comfort, and traffic flow implications. So for example, the lane drops, which create a severe bottleneck, the short merge lengths, and poor lines of sight, which make for difficult and quick decision making, and narrow unprotected sidewalks, leaving pedestrians at risk to vehicle traffic. So these are some of the issues that this project is going to look at, and you know, as a regional connector with some proximity to downtown Englewood, this interchange has a big influence on the growth and economic vitality of the city. So in early 2019, staff submitted an application for the Denver Regional Council of Governments 2020 to 2023 Transportation Improvement Program. Once the city was granted the funds, staff worked with CDOT to develop an intergovernmental agreement, which was presented to City Council for approval on May 28th of 2020. And this agreement, which is required for all federally funded local agency projects, sets the terms for utilizing the awarded funds. It also dictates things like which agency will manage the project, which agency will be responsible for maintenance, and sort of when the funds must be spent by, things like that. So following execution of the IGA, the city solicited engineering services through a public request for proposals. We got 11 different submittals, and ultimately Atkins Engineering was selected as the most qualified firm. So Atkins has been working on the project since December of 2020. And they've been busy establishing existing conditions, generating traffic models, researching environmental resources, and you know, we're really diving in right now to the alternatives analysis and even getting to some of our preliminary cost estimates, things like that. Next slide, Dan. So on this slide, we just have a quick breakdown of the funding for this project. This project has 3 separate sources of funds. We have the federal grant dollars awarded through the DRCOG TIP program. We also have state dollars, which were provided through CDOT, sort of with the caveat that money needs to be used to remove one of the signalized intersections along 285, and I think Dan will get into that in a little more detail later on. And then we also have the local dollars, which are provided by the city from the city's public improvements fund. So in total, we have $9.6 million for the project right now. And this budget is fairly tight for a project of this scope, and that's going to inform a lot of the design decisions that we'll sort of allude to later on. Next slide, Dan. So I want to go over some of the primary project goals before I let Dan jump into some of the details. So the first goal is that we want to improve traffic flow on 285, primarily by constructing an additional through lane in each direction under the bridge. We want to improve safety for all users throughout the interchange. We want to improve the aesthetics and branding of the interchange to create a gateway to downtown Englewood. We want to improve the multimodal experience. That would be primarily the experience for bicycle and pedestrian users. And we want to improve the drainage characteristics to eliminate and reduce the frequency of flooding. And I will hand it off to Dan.
Thanks, Jake. Good morning again, everybody. This is Dan Little with Atkins. So I'm going to walk through some of the project details, some of the work that we've been doing since we got started on the project back in December. So the first thing that we did is we looked at, identified several interchange alternatives just to confirm the configuration of the interchange as we move forward with this project. So what you see here are the three alternatives that we studied through traffic operations and some other considerations for the project as well. So starting on the left, we have alternative A, which is we've referred to as the existing diamond configuration. This generally matches the existing geometry that has the interchange today. This obviously is the lowest cost alternative because we're generally matching a lot of the existing configurations, so we don't have to do quite as much reconstruction. It does include a lot of geometric improvements. The existing interchange really is outdated from a geometric configuration, like sharp departure angles for the ramps aren't conducive to some of the speeds and stuff. So and we'll get into some of that detail here in a little bit. So that's the alternative A. Then alternative B we looked at, we call the tight diamond, where we're pulling in the interchange ramps tighter to 285. This does a couple of things. It creates some additional buffer space on the north to Little Dry Creek Park, and on the south side to some of the adjacent communities, residential areas as well. So it creates that buffer space. This also helps the operations of the traffic signals work together. So there's some benefits to having that be a little bit tighter configuration. This does require a reconstruction of all the ramps, so it's a little bit more cost than alternative A. And then we did look at a alternative C, which we called the single point urban interchange. This is an interchange configuration where the ramps can operate together, which makes it a little bit more effective for traffic operations for that type of interchange. This interchange does add some additional conflict points for some of the pedestrian crossings, which is some of the reasons why we actually, you see a big X here. We have actually got to the point where we've eliminated this from further consideration, just because it's a high cost. It requires full reconstruction of pretty much everything. It's probably above the budget that we have, and just some of the pedestrian multimodal considerations is why we've eliminated that alternative. So where we are today is we've kind of moved into what we're considering a preferred alternative, which is essentially it's a little bit of a combination of both alternative A and alternative B, where we're trying to pick some of the best benefits of each of those alternatives. And that's what you see here on the screen is we recognize that the additional buffer space is definitely a benefit to the community to create some additional green space. So moving those ramps in closer, like the tight diamond, is beneficial. So that's what you see here. It's moved in, maybe not quite as somewhere in between the two alternatives, but it does still create that buffer space. This does help us minimize some of the reconstruction costs, so it's kind of a balance on that. And then we've incorporated some of the geometric improvements. One of the bigger things you'll see in this alternative is this southwest corner where we've moved the ramp a little bit further east, which is also shifted that intersection a little bit to the north on that south side. So you can see that there'll be additional space in that southwest corner for some opportunities. And then one of the benefits of the existing diamond is it creates some additional storage across the bridge for the turn lanes, and which helps with some of the operations, so that we don't, for the green time and those sorts of things. So, we've kind of tried to balance that as well in the preferred alternative. One of the other things, and Jake I think talked about this earlier on, is CDOT with contributing funding for the project has had a condition at the Sherman Street intersection over the years where this has been a safety problem. There's been a number of accidents. This has just been because of the close proximity to the interchange and the ramps. This intersection at Sherman Street has been a problem. And we noticed that as we pulled some of the safety and accident data, that this intersection has a high number of accidents at this location. So part of the project is to eliminate this traffic signal and the access at Sherman Street. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but that's one of the key aspects of the project as well. So just on a high level, that alternative that we talked about, traffic operational wise, does give us good traffic operations. As you can see here on the right hand side, we in traffic lingo like to use the ABC language, which A is the best level of service and F is failing, as you would expect. So along South Broadway, this preferred alternative does give us good traffic operations. The additional through lane on US 285. We've cleaned up the Sherman Street intersection from current today, and our project actually doesn't extend to Logan Street. This is just existing conditions over here on the right. What we do as part of the traffic study, we have to look at the adjacent intersections and consider that in our analysis. So our study area was kind of Cherokee to Logan Street. On the left side, I guess I'll just point out what across the bridge section itself, we have essentially incorporated an additional left turn lane for that northbound to westbound left turn, just because of that. That's one of the higher volumes that we see for the turn. So that required us to add an additional lane. The bridge width itself is generally about what it is today for the proposed bridge crossing, because there's some additional width today that's not being used on each side of the bridge. And this also maintains the 10-foot sidewalks that are out there today. So a few other design details that we're looking at. So from a cross section of looking down 285 towards the bridge, the top section here is looking to the west. So you can see the walls today are these dashed lines right here. There is a center pier out there today. So this is kind of the bridge section you see today. So you can see we're widening it out to add the additional through lane, and then we're also adding shoulders on either side. I think we're looking at 8-foot shoulders on each side. So this does open up the interchange quite a bit. From a structure perspective, we have a couple of options. One is what we call the two-span option, which is what's out there today with a center pier in the middle of 285. This allows us to keep the bridge section shallower, not as deep for vertical clearance wise, and having to raise up the bridge to create that vertical clearance. So this does help us with those shorter spans. And what you see in here, we've actually extended the bridge north and south so that we can lay back the slopes, and we can put some tiered walls in there from aesthetics perspective. So this does have a little bit longer span than what you'll see here in a minute, the single span option. Let's jump to that. So this is the other option we're looking at, is the single span option, which doesn't have a pier in the middle. But in order to keep the superstructure to a manageable depth, and we don't have to raise the profile of Broadway, we do have the taller abutment walls, which are similar to what's out there today. Kind of creates that canyon effect. But I think even in this situation with a single span, it won't feel quite as constrained because we are widening it out. As you can see, here's the existing. So we're making this quite a bit wider with the additional lane in the shoulders, even though we would have a vertical wall. And then outside of those walls, we could still do the tiered. So from a structures perspective, we're still evaluating that, but we're looking at a 2-span or a single span option and really haven't quite made that decision yet. From a cost perspective, both of those alternatives are probably within 10% of each other. One of the questions we've been getting, and we had this at the first public meeting that we had back in February, was how we're going to build this and how does this impact traffic through the area and traffic to the businesses and those sorts of things. So what we have here is essentially we're going to build this project half at a time. So we would essentially move, in the first phase, we'll move all of the traffic to one side of the bridge. In this case, we would move all the traffic to the east side of the bridge, and then tear out the west side and build the west side of the bridge. Like I said, it's generally approximately the same width that the bridge is today. So with that width, and we do half at a time, we obviously can't keep the same number of lanes that there is today. So in this configuration, we would reduce South Broadway to 1 lane northbound and 1 lane southbound with a northbound left turn. And I'll talk about that detour here in a second. So as you can see here, we maintain the sidewalks and then have that 3 lanes across the bridge. And then in the second phase, we essentially repeat the same. We just flop it over to the other side. So we put traffic onto the west side of the bridge on the new bridge that was constructed in the previous phase. And then we build out the east side of the bridge in this phase. And then we're essentially complete. As you probably saw, we're determining that configuration. We only have 3 lanes. So we have the 1 lane north and south, and then we have a northbound left to the westbound. So that requires us to close the southbound left turn movement to eastbound 285. And what we're looking at in this configuration is detouring that traffic at Old Hampden down Sherman Street, then back to 285. We picked this route because it's on this side because it's the more commercial business route, if you will, and we're not routing traffic through the residential neighborhoods. And we've got, signals at this location. We picked this movement for the detour because it has the lowest volumes of particularly compared to like the northbound left, which has a higher volume. So this volume here is somewhat small. We will have a public outreach campaign where we'll try to encourage drivers to find alternate routes and reduce volumes. So there's probably other ways that folks can get around, but this volume here, the highest volume that we have in the peak hour, it's the PM peak with about 98 cars on this particular route. So the other thing from a traffic perspective for this phasing, is how does it perform across the bridge. So what you see in this graphic here is we did a traffic analysis. In particular, wanted to look at the north and southbound movements as we're reducing those lanes from 2 to 1 and what those delays might look like. So what we have here is the northbound travel time increases by about 3 minutes. We do see some queues, and this is just in the peak hour. This won't be over the entire day. It's just within that peak hour period. We do see some delays that extend a little bit to the south and a little bit to the north from this graphic here that you can see. From going back to kind of the level of service letter graphics, we do get down into the D's in that peak hour movement, but I think what you'll see is after the peak hour, this will operate fairly efficiently. And like I say, we end up with about a 3-minute delay northbound in the AM peak, and then a 3-minute delay in the PM peak as well. So moving on from how we're going to build the project to how the project's going to look when we get done. So as we talked about early on, one of the goals of the project is to kind of create a gateway to the community. This is a key entry point gateway to the community, the downtown area of the city of Englewood. So we're going to play off of a study that the city did in the last couple of years with a wayfinding and placemaking guide project and report that was created. And what you see here is some of the themes that were created as part of that, and it's referred to as the wooded nook concept. If anybody has seen that guide, and these are some of the elements that we'll be looking at placing at strategic locations. You know, we've got some of the wayfinding themes up here. We've got some entryway icons, some benches, and then even some of these planters and things across the bridge, the bridge and the other areas of the project. So that's kind of the theme that we're going to build off of for the project. So from a multimodal perspective, the existing interchange isn't great for the pedestrian environment. The sidewalks are adjacent to traffic. They're right up against it. So what we're going to look at is some improved, enhanced multimodal and opportunities throughout the interchange. So what you can see from the graphic here is we were going to look to try to separate the sidewalks from the roadway and create some landscaping in any locations that we can. Like across the bridge, we can put some planters, like from that wooded nook theme, some walks, just to try to create that space to make it more pedestrian friendly and inviting for walking and getting across the bridge and into the downtown area. So the other things we'll look at are some of the enhanced crosswalk opportunities to make these more friendly for pedestrians and safer. So to that end, what you see here is a couple of graphics of some of the designs that we've started to look at for the intersections on the south and the north. So starting here on the left on the south ramp intersection, as you can see, we've got the existing ramp intersection, which is a little bit further south because we've moved the ramp north, a little bit tighter than it is today. We are looking at some of these right turn movements and trying to make these more pedestrian friendly. So we've kind of aligned these up so you've got better sight distance to the pedestrians. The configuration actually kind of makes a lot of right turns that you will see at locations like free rights is that it's more about the speed of the cars. In this particular design, we've made it more about slowing cars down, making it more pedestrian crossing friendly, and we can also look at potentially even signalizing these locations for these crossings depending on the specific location, but these right turns should be pedestrian friendly. The other thing is, from a pedestrian crossing perspective, we try to make the shortest distance possible. So creating these in a location where the exposure where you're not protected is the shortest distance that we can. So that's the south intersection. On the right, we have the north ramp intersection. As you can see, it's moved a little bit further to the south, creating some additional space to Little Dry Creek Park. I think we can see some opportunities for, some of that landscape and aesthetics in these corners of the interchange as well, which we're continuing to study right now. So moving along, as I talked about before, the project is closing the traffic signal at Sherman Street. So by closing this signal, we also closed the pedestrian crossings of 285. This location, we did see some accidents at this location, so in the close proximity to the ramps, and that was part of the reason to close this this intersection. So what you see here is as we close the pedestrian crossing, there are several different ways to get across 285. One would be to take a route that takes you down to Little Dry Creek Trail, which you can cross under 285 and then come back up underneath. So this here, you don't have to manage across the traffic or the signals or anything. This is just a free crossing to get to the north. And then some of the other opportunities, obviously, we'll be reconstructing the sidewalks adjacent to 285 within the interchange area. So the green lines that you see here, you can easily get up to the bridge and get across the bridge and back into Little Dry Creek. Same on the north side, there'll be a sidewalk along this ramp. And then depending on your direction of flow, there's also sidewalks across Little Dry Creek bridge along 285 and up to Logan Street and back. So there's multiple ways to get access across 285 with the Sherman Street closure. So from kind of wrap up here, I guess from a schedule perspective, where we're at is we got our notice to proceed in early December, and then have gone through that traffic study and alternative analysis phase. We had our first public meeting back in late February, and then here we are in May. So we're getting close to wrapping up our traffic analysis and selecting that preferred alternative, and then moving into the environmental aspects. This being a federally funded project, we have to go through the NEPA process with CDOT for that component of the project. Then we move into preliminary design, and then through the fall we'll go into final design. We'll come back to a public meeting in September, October timeframe, and then we're looking to build this project in 2022. So we'll get through the plan review approval process and look to advertise it in February, and then build it probably in the summer of 2022 from a construction perspective. So our immediate next steps here, like I say, are getting the preliminary design plans pulled together and finalizing some of those things, looking at utilities, utility conflicts. We've been doing a lot of work out there on, locating utilities, those sorts of things, getting through the environmental evaluation, and then we're working pretty hard right now on the landscape and aesthetics components of the project, the wayfinding, guide signs, and those sorts of things, and working with a stakeholder group on that particular aspect of the project. So that's kind of what we're doing here in the immediate future. And that's it. I guess we can open it up to any questions the group might have.